Short is the story, long is the life.
Wukong's archive presents China Urban Legends, the Han Dynasty stone reliefs of Nanyang.
Nanyang is in the southwest of Hunan, and the Bai River runs through the city. In fame, Nanyang can't match Luoyang or Kaifeng, but when it comes to age, Nanyang is second to none. More than 2,000 years ago, this place was called Wan, and it was one of the great commanderies of the Han Dynasty after Chang'an and Luoyang. Emperor Guangwu. First, let me talk about my uncle. My uncle's surname is Zhang, named Zhang Shouzhuo, an old-fashioned name, and he was an old-fashioned man too. He was a veteran worker at the Nanyang Han Stone Carving Museum, having entered the museum in 1979. Back then, the museum was still on Wulong Ridge, just a few tile-roofed rooms, with a collection of a few hundred stones, most of which had been dug out of the fields by ordinary folks, then pulled out of pig pens and chicken coops. In the 80s, antique dealers went into the countryside to buy stones, a carved image stone for a few yuan. The farmers thought they were bad luck, so they used them to pad pig pens, build well platforms, or use as washboards. My uncle and his colleagues' job was to compete with the dealers, grind down the farmers, and chase those stones back one by one.
My uncle said that in his 30 years in this line of work, what he feared most wasn't the dealers, it was the stones themselves walking on their own.
I said, "How can stones walk?" My uncle said, "Stones buried underground get dug up by people. Dug up stones get moved around by people. Stones that get moved around eventually all come back to one place. Not back to the museum, but back to where they originally were."
I said, "Isn't that the same thing?" My uncle didn't answer. He took a drag of his cigarette and said, "You'll know when you get there."
That year, on August 3rd, my dad and I arrived in Nanyang, staying at a guest house at the foot of Wulong Ridge. During the day, my dad went to the counties to look up archive materials and inspect the fields. I had nothing to do, so I just soaked in the Han Stone Carving Museum with my uncle. By then, the museum had already moved to its new site, beside the Marquis Wu Shrine. Inside, row after row of stones stood, tall ones 2 meters high, short ones waist high. It was the first time I had seen so many carved stones, and I found it fascinating, looking at each one. My uncle followed behind me, not hurrying me, not explaining, just smoking. When I reached the very back of the hall, there was a stone shorter than all the others. Carved on it was a figure, its face turned toward me, its eyes especially large. For eyes, 2 above and 2 below, staring round and wide. I looked for a long time, then asked my uncle what it was. My uncle said, "Fangxiangshi, the one who drives away ghosts."
I said, "If it drives away ghosts, why is it staring at me?"
My uncle said, "It's not staring at you. It keeps its eyes open to guard against those things underground. If you ever see it with its eyes closed, that's when you should be afraid."
At the time I thought my uncle was being mystical and didn't take it to heart. Who knew that less than a week later, I would see it with my own eyes. That stone's eyes nearly cost me my life in Nanyang. On August 9th, someone came from Liuwa Village in Pujin Township to report that a villager digging foundation for a new house had dug up a brick tomb, and inside the tomb were carved stone slabs that the villagers had divided up among themselves. Things like this were common in the 80s, rarer in the 90s, but when they happened, they were big news. My uncle took the call, grabbed his canvas bag, and was about to head out when he looked back at me and said, "You said you wanted to see the real thing, didn't you? Let's go." Pujin Township was north of Nanyang, a 40-minute ride by motorcycle. Liuwa Village was east of Pujin Township, on the bank of a branch of the Bai River. By the time we got there, a crowd had already gathered at the village entrance. The family that dug up the tomb was surnamed Liu, and the household head was called Liu Mandun. His new house site was at the eastern edge of the village, next to the old river flats. When the foundation was dug down to about 1.5 meters, a layer of gray brick surfaced, the cracks packed with lime mortar so solid that even a crowbar couldn't pry them loose. Lu Mandun figured something was off, so he called people over. They pried it open and saw it was hollow underneath, a pitch-black hole. They tossed a rock in, and it was a long time before they heard it hit bottom. The old folks in the village said it was an old grave and shouldn't be touched. The younger ones didn't listen. They said it was cultural relic, and if they dug it out, they could sell it for money. That afternoon, someone went down into the hole. Inside was a small brick chamber with a vaulted ceiling, about the size of a single room. Stone slabs were set into all 4 walls, carved with pictures. The bold ones pried the slabs off one by one and passed them up through the looter's tunnel. Altogether, they pried off 7 slabs, 3 big for small. One of the big ones was carved with chariots and horses, one with a dragon, one with a tiger. The small ones had people, birds, and a pair of snakes twisted together.
By the time we got there, the 7 slabs had already been divided up. Lu Mandun kept the biggest one, the chariot and horses piece, for himself. His younger brother carried off the dragon. Zhao Laozhen hauled away the tiger, saying it was just right for lining a pig pen. Of the 4 small ones, one went to Qian Er, the old bachelor from the west end of the village. One was used to prop up the well platform at Widow Sun's place. One was taken by the elementary school teacher, who said he'd put it in the school for the students to see, and the last one, they said, was bought up by a dealer who came from the county town, for 80 yuan.
My uncle squatted by the edge of the looter's tunnel, staring at the pitch-black opening, and didn't say a word for a long time. My father was off to the side taking notes and sketching a floor plan. I asked my uncle whose tomb this was. He said, judging by the vaulted ceiling and the style of the bricks, it was from the Eastern Han, and the tomb owner was at least somebody of standing. Ordinary farming folk couldn't afford carved pictorial stones. The stone carvings were modeled on the house of the living. Front hall and rear chamber, chariots and horses on the move, meaning that after death, a person went on living just as before. I asked him what else was in the tomb then.
He said, everything that should be there is there, but what should be inside isn't. Look at this hole, is it old or new?
I leaned in and looked. The dirt at the edge of the opening was dry, bleached white in layers, like it had been dug into years ago. Lu Mandun said when they were digging the foundation, the opening had been sealed, packed tightly with rammed earth. If that layer of gray bricks hadn't shown itself, nobody would have guessed there was anything underneath.
My uncle rubbed the old dirt at the edge of the opening with his fingers and said, "Someone got into this tomb 20 years ago. What you pried off is what they left behind." The moment Lu Mandun heard that, his face changed. He said it was impossible, this tomb had just been dug out. My uncle didn't argue with him. He stood up, clapped his hands and said, "I'm taking the stones back for now. These belong to the state. Whoever took them, bring them back, and I'll pay compensation according to the rules. Anyone who doesn't bring them back, when the relic dealers come knocking on your door, don't come looking for me." That night we stayed at a small inn in Pujin Township. I couldn't sleep, so I asked my uncle what was really in that tomb. He turned over and said, "Tomorrow, go to Zhao Laosan's place and take a look at his stone. After you've looked at it, you'll understand."
I said a stone was a stone, what was there to see? My uncle said, when you look at it, it's looking at you too. I called him a charlatan who just liked to talk in riddles, pulled the covers over my head, and went to sleep.
That night, I had a dream. I dreamed I was standing in a pitch-black hole, surrounded by stone on every side, and the stones were covered all over with eyes, round ones, square ones, big ones, small ones, all wide open, all staring at me. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then a crack split open in the top of the cave, letting in light, and down through the light came a hand, pointing at me, and it said, "You're here." I woke with a start, just as the sky was turning pale. My uncle was already up, sitting on the edge of the bed smoking, the tip of his cigarette glowing and dimming by turns. He saw I was awake and said, "Dreamed about the stones?"
I asked him how he knew. He said, everyone who sees these things for the first time has that dream.
The next morning, I went with my uncle to Zhao Laosun's place. His house was north of the village, with a small yard and a pig pen built against the base of the west wall. 2 little tile-roofed rooms, one for living in, one for stacking firewood. When we got there, Zhao Laosun was squatting at the pig pen gate smoking, his brow twisted into a knot. The pen was empty, the ground damp, not a single pig in sight. My uncle asked, "Where are the pigs?"
Zhao Laosun said, dead. Last night, both pigs died at the same time. They were fine, no sickness, no disasters, they were even fighting over feed when I fed them. In the middle of the night I heard thrashing in the pen, and by dawn when I looked, both pigs were stiff. No wounds on them anywhere, but their eyes were wide open.
My uncle didn't say anything. He walked over to the base of the pen wall. That stone was set into the eastern wall of the pig pen. Not big, square, about 1 meter on each side. Carved on the face was a tiger, mouth open, back arched, tail raised, like it was about to pounce. The tiger's eyes were carved especially deep, 2 sunken incised lines running from the eye sockets all the way to the corners of the mouth. In the sunlight, the tiger looked like it was baring its teeth.
My uncle crouched down, touched the stone with his hand, then touched the tiger's eyes. He turned back to Zhao Laosun and asked, "This stone, how many days ago did you set it in?"
Zhao Laosun said, "Set it the day before yesterday. Last night the pigs died."
My uncle nodded and said, "Take the stone out. The pigs weren't killed by the stone, it was your own nervousness, you messed up their feeding. But this stone can't be set up like that. You put it inside the pen and made the livestock face it every day, the animals can't take that." Zhao Laosun was doubtful and said, "This stone is a malevolent object?"
My uncle said, "It's not malevolent. It's a sacred object. What's carved on it is the white tiger. The white tiger guards the west. It's a gatekeeper. You set it inside a pig pen and made it keep watch for pigs. It wouldn't stand for that. The moment it glared, the pigs got scared to death." Hearing that, Zhao Laosun hurriedly called people over to remove the stone. When they took it down and flipped it over, the back was rough with nothing carved on it. Only a few white marks, like something had scraped against it. My uncle leaned in and looked for a long time, then suddenly reached out and ran his hand along the back. He touched one of the marks and stopped.
He asked me, "When you went into the cave yesterday, did you see whether there were more paintings on the walls inside?" I said I hadn't looked closely, I was too busy looking at the stone.
My uncle said, "This stone has scrape marks on its back. Someone pried it off a wall by force, and when they pried it, it dragged along the ground. But the 7 stones that came out yesterday, I checked all of them, and their backs were completely clean. This one has old scrape marks on its back. They weren't made yesterday."
I asked him where it came from, then.
My uncle didn't answer. He flipped the stone over, looked at the white tiger on the front again, and suddenly said, "This stone has been in another place. Someone dug it out of one tomb, then buried it in another. Someone used it as a door."
At the time I didn't understand. It wasn't until later that I learned that day, in that pile of dirt at Lu Mandan's place, my uncle had turned up half a piece of pottery shard with a stamp on it that matched the scrape marks on the back of Zhao Laosun's stone. He'd already guessed 7 or 8 parts of it by then, he just hadn't told me. That afternoon, my father went around the village visiting households, and my uncle took me along to look at the remaining stones door to door.
Qian Er's piece was a small stone, carved with 2 figures, human heads on serpent bodies, tails entwined together, one holding a sun disk, the other holding a moon disk. Qian Er had placed it in his courtyard as a stone stool, saying it was cool to sit on. My uncle looked at it and said, "This is Fuxi and Liuwa, holding the sun and moon, old deities from Han Dynasty stone reliefs. You've been using it as a stool, and it hasn't blamed you, but don't sit on it at night." Qian'er asked why. My uncle said, "At night it's awake. Deities don't rest at night."
Qian'er's face changed, and he said, "Teacher Zhang, don't scare me." My uncle said, "I'm not scaring you. Turn around and look, aren't there 2 marks on that stone stool, like the impressions left by someone sitting on it?"
Qian'er bent down to look. Sure enough, there were 2 shallow indentations on the stool's surface, worn smooth and shiny, as if someone had sat there for years. Qian'er said, "Isn't that just from what you mentioned, me sitting on it every day, wearing it out?" My uncle said, "You've only had this stone for 2 days." Qian'er fell silent.
The well platform at Widow Sun's house was padded with the smaller piece, carved with a bird, long-tailed, head raised high, claws treading on a cloud. Widow Sun said that ever since she'd placed this stone there, the well water had changed flavor. The water drawn up ran murky, tasted of earth and mud, and even the vegetables wouldn't grow well when watered with it. My uncle looked at it and said, "This is the vermilion bird. The vermilion bird belongs to fire. You've pressed it down on the well platform, the water vapor suppresses the fire energy, and the 2 clash. Better swap in a different stone."
Widow Sun asked, "Then is this bird stone unlucky?"
My uncle said, "It's not unlucky, it's just placed in the wrong spot. It should be up on a roof beam, watching over the 4 directions, or up in the sky, carrying the sun on its back. You've wedged it under a well. It wants to rise but can't, so the water follows it into unrest."
The piece taken by the village elementary school teacher was the most intact of the 4 small stones, carved with a row of figures, one playing a flute, one beating a drum, one dancing, and in the center a person wearing a tall crown, mouth open as if singing. My uncle looked at it and said this was a music and dance performance scene, the kind of thing the tomb's owner had enjoyed watching in life. He urged the teacher to keep the stone in the school's storeroom for now, not to put it out where students could touch it, until the museum came to process the paperwork. The teacher agreed readily. 7 stones, 6 examined. As for the one that had been collected by the dealer from the county town, my uncle noted down the name. The stone collector's surname was Chow, called Chow Wanjin, and he ran a sundry goods shop in Nanyang city center, selling general merchandise on the surface, but secretly trafficking old artifacts. He'd been in this line since the 1980s, and in the trade they called him Chow Half County. Half the county's cultural relics passed through his hands. My uncle said, "Chow Wanjin works fast. Once a stone reaches his hands, it won't stay in Nanyang more than 3 days. We need to cut him off before he ships it out." That day, my father came back from his rounds with news. The village elders said that the land where Liu Mandan's family lived had been the Liu family's old cemetery before liberation. It was leveled during the land reform, all the grave mounds pushed flat. And before that, during the Republic era, something had happened there. Someone dug up stone figures and stone horses from the ground, hauled them back to build a wall, and later that family died out overnight, their house collapsed, and the land went fallow. The village elders all said that land was cursed, and no one went near it lightly.
After hearing this, my uncle smoked half a cigarette, then said, "That fits now."
That night, my father was in the inn organizing the census records, and I lay on the bed listening to my uncle talk about the finer points of Han Dynasty stone tomb carvings. My uncle said the Han people believed in treating death as if it were life. However you lived, that's how you'd keep living after death. So when rich people died, their tombs were built just like their houses. Front hall for receiving guests, back chamber for sleeping, side chambers for grain, livestock and kitchen stoves. Carved on the walls, chariots and horses in procession meant they'd still have a grand entourage when they went out after death. Music and acrobatics meant they'd still have shows to watch. Fuxi, Niuwa, and the Queen Mother of the West meant they were begging the immortals to guide them, begging for longevity. Everything had to be prepared, not a single thing missing. I said, "So it's just moving your daily life underground." My uncle said, "Right, just moving your daily life underground." The Han people believed that death wasn't the end. It was moving to a new place. So a tomb couldn't be empty. If it was empty, the owner would be poor, and if the owner was poor, he'd start making trouble. I said, "Then what about the eyes on those stone carvings?" My uncle took a drag of his cigarette and said, "On the stones, the immortals' eyes were carved last. The craftsman would carve the body, the clothes, the chariots and horses, all done, but leave the eyes uncarved. Only on the day of burial, before sealing the tomb, would someone the family hired take a chisel and dot the eyes in. This was called opening the face. Once the face was opened, the immortals on the stone were considered alive, and only then did they take on the duties of this house. Guarding the gate for the owner, guiding the way, warding off evil, protecting the tomb. Stone that hadn't had its face opened was dead stone. It could go anywhere, but once opened, it was alive, and it had its duty."
I said, "That white tiger on Zhao Laosun's land, was its face opened?"
My uncle said, "It was. You saw it in the daylight. Those eyes, weren't they carved deep? That's a face that's been opened. The two lines in its eyes weren't carved. They were added later. When the eyes were being dotted, the craftsman's hand was heavy and the chisel slipped."
I said, "So what it's watching, is it those two pigs in the pig pen?"
My uncle said, "It's not watching the pigs. It's watching what's underground. The white tiger guards the west, guarding against anything that comes from the west. Pigs are living creatures with strong yang energy. The moment it opened its eyes, the pigs couldn't take it anymore." I swallowed and said, "But what if the thing it's watching, what if that thing comes up from underground?"
My uncle stubbed out his cigarette and said, "Then it's time for it to go to work. When it goes to work, it means the tomb owner is about to go out. And when a tomb owner goes out, it's usually not good news." I asked him, "Who's the owner of that tomb?" My uncle said, "I checked the county records. That patch of land where Lu Mandun lives, back in the Eastern Han, it was the estate of a man surnamed Lu, a commandery assistant in one county. A commandery assistant managed all the documents, money, and grain for a whole commandery, a real position of power. His family had money and influence, and when he died, he could afford to build a carved stone tomb. The county records have one entry, 4th year of Guanghe. Lu of Wan commandery died and was buried north of Whitewater. The 4th year of Guanghe was during Emperor Ling of the Eastern Han, year 181 AD. At that time, there were still 3 years before the Yellow Turban Rebellion and 40 years before the fall of the Eastern Han. The world was already descending into chaos. Plague everywhere, the dead uncountable. Wealthy families were rushing to build their tombs, making them as sturdy as they possibly could, afraid of not having a peaceful place to rest after death. My uncle said, "Commandery Assistant Lu's tomb wasn't built especially large, but it had everything it should. Front hall, back chamber, chariots and horses, music and dance, the 4 directional spirits. Not one thing missing. By all rights, he should be lying peacefully underground, waiting for his sons and grandsons to come make offerings at Qingming and the New Year. But his tomb was dug open once 20 years ago, and some of the carved stones were pried away. Then it was dug open again yesterday, and the remaining 7 stones were split up too." My uncle looked at me and said, "The tomb owner's house has been broken into 3 times, and his door's been changed 3 times. You tell me, could he not have some fire in him?"
I said, "The stone is dead. What fire could it have?"
My uncle said, "The stone is dead. But the eyes on the stone, they're alive."
On August 11th, we went back to town to find Chao Wanjin. Chao Wanjin's general store was on the old street of the Nanyang county seat. The storefront wasn't big. It sold soy sauce, salt, needles, and thread. Behind the counter hung a cloth curtain, and behind the curtain was a courtyard piled with second-hand goods he'd collected. When we arrived, Chao Wanjin was sitting at the door waving a palm leaf fan. When he saw my uncle, he stood up with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Teacher Zhang, a rare guest."
My uncle didn't beat around the bush. He said, "Liuwa Village, Pushin Township, 7 stones turned up the day before yesterday. You took one in, 80 yuan. Right? The smile on Chao Wenjin's face didn't change. Teacher Zhang gets around. That's true enough. But that stone, I passed it on right away. My uncle said, to who?
Chao Wenjin said, Teacher Zhang, you know the rules of the trade. Once goods leave your hands, you don't ask about the next buyer.
My uncle said, that stone came out of a Han tomb. It's a thing with an owner. Taking it in, that's grave robbing, that's trafficking. I've got witness statements in hand. Who you sold it to is your business. But if that stone leaves Nanyang, and it gets traced back, you're the first one they come for. Chao Wenjin's fan paused for a moment, then started waving again. Teacher Zhang, that's putting it a bit heavy. A broken stone, the kind of thing you'd use to build a pig pen. How much could it be worth? To be honest, that stone was wanted by a private buyer. The price wasn't high, just 150. I made 70 yuan for my trouble. I don't know the man's name. I just remember he had a Hebei accent, tall and thin, missing 2 fingers on his left hand. He said he was collecting for a boss in Beijing, collecting pictorial stones, the more the better.
My uncle said, how many has he taken in?
Chao Wenjin said, that I wouldn't know. But Teacher Zhang, let me offer you a word of advice. These days there are a lot of people in Nanyang buying up stones, not just out-of-towners, locals too. Those stones in your museum, you'd better keep a close eye on them.
My uncle didn't ask anything else. He turned and left. I caught up and asked whether he believed what Chao Wenjin said. My uncle said, believe half. The stone really did change hands. But whether the next buyer really was from Hebei, hard to say. That man Chao Wenjin, out of every 10 sentences he speaks, 8 are hollow, and the remaining 2 are watered down too. He stirred the water muddy on purpose, trying to get me off his back.
I asked what we should do then. My uncle said, wait. After a stone buyer takes in goods, either he hides them or he's in a hurry to move them. If he hides them, he'll show his head sooner or later. If he's in a hurry to move them, he has to ship them out. In Nanyang, goods go out 2 ways. One is the railway, the other is the water route on the Bai River. I'll go put the word out, have the people at the station and the docks keep their eyes open.
That afternoon, my uncle went to the station to find his contacts. My father went to the municipal library to look up the Liu family genealogy. I had nothing to do at the inn, and then I suddenly thought of Zhao Laosun's white tiger stone. My uncle said it had been face-opened. I hadn't looked at it carefully in the daylight, and I was itching to go take another look.
I borrowed a bicycle from the innkeeper, rode for 40 minutes, and reached Liuwa Village again. When I got to Zhao Laosan's door, the sun was about to set. Zhao Laosan wasn't home. His wife was chopping vegetables in the yard. I asked where the white tiger stone was. She said, we took it down. It's thrown in the woodshed. Teacher Zhang said a truck from the museum would come for it.
I went into the woodshed, and the stone was right there, leaning against the wall, tiger face turned outward. The light in the woodshed was dim, but the tiger's eyes were easier to see in the dark, 2 deep incised lines running from the eye sockets to the corners of the mouth, like 2 scars. I crouched down and moved in close. The tiger's eyes were 2 hollows chiseled out, the bottoms polished shiny, as if someone had rubbed them with their fingers. As if possessed, I reached out and touched the hollow with my fingertip. The stone was ice cold, but in the hollow, there was a trace of warmth. I flinched and pulled my hand back. I touched it again. Cold. I thought I'd misread it, so I touched it a 3rd time. Still cold. I stood up, figured it must have been my imagination, and was about to leave when I suddenly heard a sound from outside the woodshed, from the direction of the pigpen, not a pig's squeal, but something like whatever it was pushing at the pigpen door. I went out to look. The pigpen door was shut tight. The pen was empty, nothing in it. Zhao Laosun's wife was in the yard and asked what I was looking for. I said I heard something moving in the pen. She said, that pen's been empty for 3 days. What could be moving in there? Your ears are playing tricks.
I didn't say anything. I got on the bike and headed back. By the time I rode out of the village entrance, it was already dark. The mist from the Bai River's branch rose up, and a thin fog settled over the fields. When I rode onto that stretch of road along the riverbank, I suddenly felt someone following behind me. I looked back. The road was completely empty, nothing but fog.
I pedaled harder. When I reached Pushan Township and got onto the main road, my heart finally settled. On August 13th, something happened. First it was Chien Er. That night, Chien Er got up to pee and passed through the yard when he heard something under the stone bench, tap, 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 like someone knocking on stone with their knuckles. Chien Er thought a thief had gotten in. He grabbed a shovel and circled the yard once, no one there. He squatted down and pressed his ear to the bench. The sound got even clearer, coming from inside the stone itself, knocking at a leisurely pace.
Chien Er said later he had no idea where he found the guts, but he rapped the shovel handle against the bench and yelled, "Who's there?"
The sound stopped. Chien Er figured it was nothing, went back in, and lay down. He'd barely hit the pillow when the sound started up again. This time it wasn't knocking, it was scratching. Like someone dragging fingernails across the back of the stone. Scrape a line, pause, scrape another line. Chien Er didn't sleep a wink all night. At daybreak he ran to the village committee and said that stone bench was haunted and he absolutely refused to keep it. Next was Widow Sunday. On the morning of the 13th, the water drawn from Widow Sun's well came up red. Not murky, red. Like blood had been mixed in. Widow Sun was so startled she threw down the bucket and ran to the neighbors to borrow water. The neighbor said, "That stone's sitting under your well curb, I saw it glowing last night." Widow Sun asked what kind of light. The neighbor said, "Red. Dark red, flickering like a flame." I looked at it twice and it was gone. I figured my eyes were playing tricks on me.
Then there was Lu Mantung. Lu Mantung had put the largest chariot and horses stone in the main room of his house, covered it with red cloth, and said it was to ward off evil and steady the house. On the night of the 13th, he heard hoofbeats in the main room. Clop, 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 like a whole horse-drawn carriage circling around inside the house. He mustered his courage, lifted the red cloth. The stone was perfectly fine. The carriage carved on it hadn't moved a bit. But when he lay back down, the hoofbeats started again. This time mixed with the jingling of copper bells. As real as could be. Lu Mantung didn't dare close his eyes all night. Before dawn he biked to town and cornered Uncle at the door of the inn.
My dad got pulled in too. He spent the whole morning writing in his survey notebook, and finally said, "This is collective psychological suggestion. The stones are new, the people are old. You've already got ghosts in your heads, so everything looks like a ghost to you." Uncle didn't answer. He smoked a cigarette to the end, then said, "Bring all 4 stones back. I'll call for a vehicle this afternoon."
That afternoon, the museum's truck came and took Old Zhao's White Tiger Stone, Chien Er's Fuxianyuwa Stone, Widow Sun's Vermilion Bird Stone, and the Music and Dance Stone from the school storeroom. All 4 hauled back to the museum. As for Lu Mantung's chariot and horses stone, Uncle said to leave it at his place for now and pick it up once the paperwork at the museum was done. In reality, Uncle wanted to use it as bait, that man from Hebei that Chao Wanjin had mentioned. If he was really collecting stones, the chariot and horses stone was the best one out there. He'd definitely come for it. Uncle instructed my dad, "From today on, don't let Lu Mantung's house out of your sight. I'll watch during the day, you keep guard at night." My dad asked, "Until when?" Uncle said, "Until the stone is inside the museum."
That night, my dad moved over to Lu Mantung's place. I stayed at the inn with Uncle.
On the night of August 15th, a little after 10, I was in the inn watching TV when Uncle suddenly came back from outside. The moment he stepped through the door, he said, "Come on, let's go to the museum." I asked what we were going to the museum for in the middle of the night. Uncle said, "Chao Wanjin just called me. The man from Hebei has surfaced. He set up to view the goods tomorrow just before dawn, under the old bridge east of town. He said he's afraid something might go wrong, so he moved the goods somewhere else, moved them into the museum." I was taken aback. Moved the goods into the museum? Whose goods? Uncle said, "The 4 stones." This afternoon, when he had the museum's truck haul the stones, he kept his wits about him. Didn't take them straight into the storeroom, parked them in the corridor behind the exhibition hall for now. Chao Wanjin said the man has his eye on the chariot and horse stone, but that one's still at Lu Mandan's house. He was afraid the man would come up empty and lose his temper, take it out on the 4 smaller ones, so he moved the small ones into the museum first to be safe. I said, "Then how does he know the layout of your museum?"
Uncle stopped mid-step, turned his head to look at me. Of course he doesn't. So this phone call, it's fake. I was stunned. Fake?
Uncle said, "Chao Wanjin wouldn't call me to pass along word. He'd be glad if I stayed out of it. That call wasn't from Chao Wanjin. Someone knows we've been watching closely, so they deliberately spread the rumor, trying to lure us under the old bridge." I said, "So do we go or not?" Uncle said, "We go. If we go, we'll find out who spread the rumor."
By the time we reached the Han Portrait Stone Museum, it was almost midnight. Old Zhou, the gatekeeper, opened the door for us. The exhibition hall was dark. Only a dim yellow lamp burned in the corridor. The 4 stones were standing against the wall at the end of the corridor. In a row, White Tiger, Fushi and Liuwa, Vermilion Bird, Music and Dance. Under the lamplight, the carvings cast long shadows, like living creatures crouching on the wall.
Uncle stood in front of the stones for a moment, then suddenly said, "Something's off."
I asked what was off. Uncle pointed at the white tiger stone. "Look at its eyes."
I leaned in to look. The tiger's 2 eyes, in daylight they were just 2 hollow pits. But now, with the lamplight slanting in, there seemed to be something in the pits, not bare stone, but a layer of something glistening, like water, or like wax. Uncle reached out and touched it. A little came off on his finger. He brought it to his nose and smelled it, and his face changed. Wax. Someone lit candles for it. A chill ran down my spine. Lit candles? Why would anyone light candles for a stone?
Uncle said, "In Han times, when someone was buried, before carving the face onto a portrait stone, they first lit a lamp to honor the gods. It was called opening the light. Only after the light was opened did they cut the face. Someone lit a candle for this stone. They were honoring it. They were treating it as a living thing."
I said, "Who did it?"
Uncle didn't answer. He suddenly raised his head and looked toward the end of the corridor. In the depths of the exhibition hall, it was pitch black. Nothing could be seen. But I knew what he was looking at. Earlier that day, when I gave him the tour, at the very back of the hall stood that Fangxiangshi, the 4-eyed guardian.
Uncle said quietly, "It's been lying there with its eyes open for 30 years. Tonight, I'm afraid someone is going to ask it to go to work."
The moment he finished speaking, from deep in the exhibition hall came a very faint sound, like a stone shifting a little.
That sound, like someone stepping on loose gravel, shifting half a step. Uncle shone the light deeper into the exhibition hall. The beam swept across row after row of pictorial stone carvings, shadows stretching long and short, nothing there. Old Zhou called from the door, "Teacher Zhang, what's wrong?" Uncle said, "Nothing, just looking at the stones."
He set the lamp down and lowered his voice to me. "You stay here and watch these 4. Don't move. I'm going to check the back."
I said, "Don't go alone." Uncle said, "I work in this hall. the stones know me. You stay here, don't open the door for anyone.
He took a flashlight and walked deeper into the hall. His footsteps rang loud in the empty space, then after 7 or 8 steps, they were gone, the stones swallowed the sound. I stood alone in the aisle, facing those 4 stones, the light dim yellow, my shadow stretched long.
I looked at the white tiger stone. The tiger's eyes gleamed under the light, the wax not yet fully dried. Then I looked at Fuxi and Liuwa, 2 snake-bodied gods, holding the sun and moon discs, their tails entwined. Their eyes also 2 chiseled hollows, pitch black, like 2 deep wells. The vermilion bird raised its head. The row of musicians in the dance scene had their mouths open, as if singing, or as if screaming.
My skin crawled. I wanted to leave, but I was afraid Uncle would come out and not find me. I stood there for about 10 minutes, when from deep in the hall, Uncle's voice suddenly came, "Come here."
I hurried over. At the very back of the hall, in front of the Fangxiangshi stone, Uncle was crouched on the ground, his flashlight aimed at the stone's base. I leaned in and looked. Around the base was a ring of white lime, fresh, not yet dried. Someone had moved the stone.
Uncle said, someone moved it away, then moved it back. Look at this print, a shoe print. Size 42, pointed toe, leather. Nobody in this hall wears shoes like that. I said, that man from Hebei? Uncle said, he can't get in. The hall locks up at night, and old Joe sleeps in the gatehouse. Anyone coming in has to pass him. But this stone, it's been touched.
He stood up and shone the flashlight on Fangxiangshi's face. That face, 4 eyes, 2 above, 2 below, looked especially fierce under the light. In the daytime I'd thought it merely imposing, but now it seemed to be staring at something. Not at me, but behind me. I whipped my head around. Behind me was the hall wall, where a calligraphy scroll hung reading "Home of Han Dynasty Carvings." Nothing unusual.
Uncle said, come on, let's go back to those 4.
We returned to the aisle. The 4 stones stood there just fine. Uncle crouched down and looked carefully at the white tiger's eyes. After a long while, he suddenly said, "The wax is new, but the eyes were never opened."
I said, what do you mean?
Uncle said, opening the face, on the day of sealing the tomb, the family lights incense and candles, and the craftsman takes his chisel and, in one strike, carves out the eyes. Once carved, the eyes are alive. But this tiger, the eyes were chiseled, and the chisel marks are fresh, not old ones. Someone first carved the eyes. Then today someone dotted wax on them. The order is reversed.
I said, what happens if the order is reversed? Uncle said, dot wax first, then chisel the eyes, that's called lighting the living. Chisel the eyes first, then dot wax, that's called waking it up. Lighting the living means inviting a god to work. Waking it up means calling it up to take a look, to see who it was that dug it out of its home.
A chill ran down my spine, then it saw me. Uncle looked at me and said nothing. That night, we kept watch in the hall until dawn. Nothing else happened. Old Joe said he never closed his eyes all night and heard nothing. My father kept watch at Lou Madden's house all night and said the horse and chariot stone was fine, and the sound of hooves at the Lou place stopped in the latter half of the night. We thought it was over. Who would have known, that was only the beginning. On August 17th, my uncle sent me to the Medical Sage Temple to deliver a message.
The Medical Sage Temple was east of Nanyang City, a place commemorating Zhang Shouzhuo. Zhang Shouzhuo was a native of Nanyang in the Eastern Han Dynasty, author of the treatise on cold damage and miscellaneous diseases, and the founding ancestor of traditional Chinese medicine. In those years, the temple's incense was thin. Living there was an old man who looked after the temple, surnamed One, over 70 years old, one of the few old-timers in Nanyang who truly understood Han Dynasty stone relief carvings. In his youth he had taught in the countryside around Nanyang, seen countless stones dug up from the earth, and heard old folks tell the origins of these stones. My uncle asked me to go and ask old Mr. Wen one question. When Prefectural Vice Governor Lu's tomb was buried back then, did they hire someone to open the altar? Opening the altar was a procedure before a Han Dynasty tomb was sealed. The family would hire a Fangxiangshi, a ritual master, to set up an altar at the gravesite and make offerings to the deities of the underworld, declaring that this plot of land belonged to the tomb's occupant and no one was allowed to encroach upon it. The Han people called this buying the land, and the contract carved in stone was called a land purchase deed. On the deed was written, "Fields have boundaries, waters have shores. This tomb has its master. Whoever dares to trespass shall bring calamity upon themselves." My uncle said, if Prefectural Vice Governor Lu's tomb had opened the altar back then the things inside that tomb had an owner. And when something has an owner, if you touch it, it will come looking for you.
I rode my bike to the medical sage temple and found old Mr. Wen. The old man was sitting under the eaves basking in the sun. After hearing my purpose, he said slowly, "Prefectural Vice Governor Liu? The Vice Governor of Liu from north of White Water?"
I said yes. The county gazetteer records he was buried in the 4th year of Guanghe. The old man said, "Go back and tell your uncle. Prefectural Vice Governor Lu's tomb not only had the altar opened, but he also had people make guardian stones for the tomb, carved from rock. He feared someone would dig up his grave after he died, so at each of the 4 corners of the burial chamber, he buried a stone carved with a Fangxiangshi, the 4-eyed exorcist, each with 4 eyes, facing 4 directions, watching the gate for him. When the 4 corners have guardians, no evil can intrude." I said, "But that tomb was dug into 3 times. What about the guardians?" The old man gave me a look. "You've hit the crux of it. If the guardians were still there, the tomb wouldn't have been dug into. If the guardians were gone, then that thing came out."
I asked him, when did the guardians disappear?
The old man said, "I don't know, but I know another thing. In your uncle's museum, isn't there a 4-eyed Fangxiangshi?"
I said, yes.
The old man said, "That stone is not from Prefectural Vice Governor Lu's tomb. It was dug out of the riverbank in 1958, when they were building the White River levee. When they dug it up, the stone was standing upright, face pointing upward, its 4 eyes wide open, as if it had just sat up from beneath the earth. The people at the time found it unlucky and wanted to smash it, but then someone from the cultural center took it away, and it ended up in the Han Stone Relief Museum. How many years that stone lay buried in the riverbank, no one knows. But the day it came out of the ground, upstream and downstream of the White River, 9 villages were flooded."
My scalp went numb. It was facing up, 4 eyes. The old man said, "It's had its eyes open, watching for almost 40 years. 40 years, it's never stopped watching." "Watching who?" "Watching the people who dug it out of the earth. Your uncle understands this. All these years, he's kept it at the very back of the exhibition hall, face turned to the wall." I was stunned. Face to the wall?
The old man said, "Yes, face to the wall so it won't look. If it turned around, someone in that museum would be in for bad luck." I went back to the museum and told my uncle everything old Mr. Wen had said, word for word. After my uncle heard it all, he smoked half a cigarette, stubbed it out and said, "I know."
I said, "You know what?"
My uncle said, "That Fangxiangshi, someone moved it and then moved it back. The person who moved it wasn't trying to steal it. He was trying to turn it around, face outward. He knew what he was doing. He knew that stone must not face outward, but he wanted to turn it anyway. He wasn't a stone thief. He was someone who came to put something in."
I said, "Put what in?"
My uncle said, "To let it out. The guardians in Prefectural Vice Governor Lu's tomb, 4 of them, 3 are lost. The one remaining is the Fangxiangshi. Someone dug it out of Lu's tomb and buried it again in the White River. It became the guardian of the river. For 40 years it's been guarding the river, not the tomb. Prefectural Vice-Governor Liu's tomb has had no guardian for a long time now.
On August 19th, my father caught a man at Liu Mandan's house. That night, in the middle of the night, my father got up to use the outhouse and heard movement in the main room. He pushed open the main room door and saw a man squatting in front of the chariot and horse stone, holding a candle, dripping wax onto the stone. The man heard the door creak, stood up, and ran. My father, a man in his 50s, chased after him and tackled him in the yard. Both of them ended up covered in mud.
The man was pinned to the ground, still talking. "Let me go. I'm from the Cultural Relics Bureau. I'm here on a case." My father said, "The Cultural Relics Bureau works cases by climbing over walls into people's main rooms in the middle of the night to light candles on stones?"
The man struggled and said, "You don't understand, this is procedure, the procedure for opening the face. When we collect stones, we have to open the face first, otherwise the stone won't let us touch it."
My father hauled him to the town police station. The police checked him out. The man's surname was Ma, and he was a flunky under a cultural relic dealer from Hubei, specializing in collecting pictorial stone reliefs around Nanyang and Xuchang. He said his boss had collected over a dozen Nanyang pictorial stones and sold them all off, except for one big piece that he'd never been able to get his hands on, the chariot and horse stone at Liu Mandan's house. His boss said no matter how much money it took, he had to get that stone. If he didn't need to bother coming back.
The police asked him, "Who taught you to drip wax on the stone?"
The man named Ma said, "My boss taught me." My boss said, with Nanyang pictorial stones, first drip the wax, then chisel the eye hole. The order can't be reversed. If you reverse it, the stone will make trouble. He told me to repeat 3 times in my head while dripping the wax. Borrow the way, borrow the way, borrow the way. After chanting, then make your move, and the stone won't make trouble.
My father asked, "Did you chant it or not?" The man named Ma said, "Didn't get the chance. You came in before I could."
The next day, my uncle went to the police station and dug up the full background on Ma's boss. The boss's surname was Zhou, from Baoding, Hubei. He'd started collecting Nanyang pictorial stones in the 80s, gathering no fewer than 50 over the years, all sold to foreign collectors in America, Japan, France, all over. Zhou never got his own hands dirty. He hired people to go into the countryside and collect, then rented a warehouse on the outskirts of Nanyang to stockpile them. Once he had enough for a shipment, he'd move them out by boat along the Bai River. My uncle said, 50 stones. He dug up more than 20 Han Dynasty tombs in Nanyang. I asked, the tomb-quelling stones in Liu Juanqing's tomb, did he dig those up too? My uncle said, 9 times out of 10. When he collects stones, he only takes pictorial reliefs, Fangxiangshi, the 4 spirits, Fuxi and Nuwa, all of those were names on his list. He knows the trade, knows which pieces are worth money. The time Liu Juanqing's tomb was dug up 20 years ago, that was him. For tomb-quelling stones were lost. 3 were sold abroad, and the one that turned up on the riverbank, he never got his hands on. Workers repairing the levee dug it up, and it ended up in our museum.
I said, so him coming back this time, he's after the chariot and horse stone.
My uncle said, after the chariot and horse stone, and after the Fangxiangshi too. The 3 tomb-quelling stones in his hands are all overseas now. He can't complete the set. But if he gets the one in our museum and completes all 4 cardinal tomb-quelling stones in his possession, he'd dare to open Liu Juanqing's tomb again. I said, the tomb's already empty. What's there to open? My uncle looked at me. The tomb is empty, but what's underneath the tomb isn't made of stone. On August 21st, the carriage and horse stone from Liu Mandan's place officially entered the museum. The paperwork was done during the day. The cart was pulled to the museum gate. A few workers carried it down, and it went straight into the storeroom, registered and catalogued. My uncle watched it being put into storage himself, locked the storeroom door, put the key in his pocket and said, Now I can stop worrying. That night was my last night in Nanyang. My father's survey was finished, and we had train tickets for the morning of the 22nd. I packed my things and thought I'd go say goodbye to my uncle. At the gate of the Han Painting Museum, old Zhou said, "Teacher Zhang is in the exhibition hall. He said he wants to find a spot for the new stone." I went into the exhibition hall. The lights were on. My uncle was standing at the far end, in front of the Fangxiangshi stone. On the floor before him stood a stone. It was exactly that carriage and horse stone, horses and carriage setting out. A trail of dust, carved so vividly it seemed alive. But I remembered that when it was put into storage that afternoon, the carriage and horse stone had gone into the storeroom.
I said, "Uncle, didn't this stone get put into storage?"
My uncle didn't turn around. The one put into storage is another piece. This one is fake.
I was startled. Fake?
He said, "The one they hauled here this afternoon is a copy Lu Mandan had someone carve, cut to match the real stone. Newly carved, only half-aged. The real stone is still at Lu Mandan's place."
I said, "Why?" He said, "Because this afternoon, someone went to Lu Mandan's house and offered 3,000 yuan to buy the real stone. Lu Mandan wouldn't sell it, but before that person left, he said something, 'Keep it, and sooner or later it'll bring disaster on your family.' Lu Mandan got scared. He came to me that same night, said he doesn't want the stone anymore, and asked me to figure something out. I said, 'Then why didn't you just bring in the real stone?'
My uncle said, "If I brought in the real one, the storeroom would be broken into tomorrow. That Zhou guy has been watching this stone for half a month. He knows the stone entered the museum, but he doesn't know which one entered. I let him think the real stone is in the museum, so he'll make his move tonight. When he does, I'll be here waiting for him."
I said, "You're waiting alone?" He said, "Not alone. It's here too."
He pointed at the Fangxiangshi in front of him. That square stone with its 4 eyes stared back under the light.
I said, "Didn't you say it can't face outward?"
My uncle said, "Tonight, it has to face outward once. That Zhou guy has taken 50 Nanyang stones and dug up more than 20 tombs. Someone ought to look at him now."
We turned off the lights and hid in the duty room next to the exhibition hall, leaving the door cracked. Through the crack, the hall was pitch dark, with only a little streetlight from outside leaking in, outlining the blurry shapes of the stones.
We waited until a little past 2 in the morning. Suddenly there was a faint sound in the hall, very light, like someone barefoot on cement. I held my breath and looked through the crack. I saw a dark figure slip in through the side door of the hall, hunched over, heading straight for the Fangxiangshi stone. The figure crouched in front of the stone, pulled something from inside his coat, and a lighter flared. He was lighting a candle.
The candle caught. A single flame, small as a bean, lit up the man's face, tall and thin, with 2 fingers missing on his left hand. It was exactly the man Chao Wanjin had described. The man set the candle upright before the stone and muttered something under his breath. I could hear what he was saying, "Grant passage, grant passage, grant passage."
When he finished, he took out a chisel and a hammer from inside his coat, and leaned in close to the Fangxiangshi's face. He was going to chisel out those 4 eyes.
The moment the chisel touched the stone, the flame went out. It wasn't blown out by wind. It just died, all at once, as if something had come out of the stone and smothered the fire. The man froze, lit the lighter again. The flame had barely risen when it went out again. The 3rd time, the flame stayed lit, but the hand holding the lighter began to shake. He drew back a step. The lighter fell from his hand. The exhibition hall went completely dark. I heard his voice, trembling beyond control. Who is looking at me?" No one answered. The hall was so quiet you could hear dust land on the floor. The man suddenly let out a scream and turned to run. He ran too fast, slammed into one of the stones in the hall with a thud, and fell to the ground. He scrambled up, crawling and tumbling, and bolted out through the side door, faster than a rabbit, losing a leather shoe on the way. When we chased out after him, all that was left at the door was one pointed leather shoe. Size 42. My uncle stood at the entrance of the hall, looking at that shoe, and said, he saw it.
I said, saw what? He said, ask it.
I turned around. At the far end of the hall, the Fangxiangshi stood in the darkness. I couldn't see its face, but I knew that its 4 eyes, at that moment, were open.
Epilogue.
On August 22nd, I took the train leaving Nanyang. My father smoked on the platform and said, "This survey got us quite a bit."
I said,
As the train started moving, a thought suddenly occurred to me, and I asked my uncle, who had come to see us off, "Yesterday you said that the day the Fangxiangshi was unearthed, 9 villages up and down the Bai River flooded. So before it came into the museum, who hauled it up from the riverbank?"
My uncle said, I did. In 1959, I was 19, running errands at the cultural center. I followed an old master worker to the riverbank to cart stones. Back then we didn't understand, and nobody understood. We loaded it onto the cart, face up, and hauled it all the way back to the city.
I said, then didn't you feel it looking at you?
My uncle was silent for a moment, then said, "I was young then. I didn't feel it. Later, after I'd worked in the museum for a long time and learned a few things, I remembered something. That day when we were hauling the stone on the way back, we passed the Bai River Bridge. Someone under the bridge shouted, 'The stone has turned over.' We stopped the cart and looked. That square stone was lying peacefully on the cart, but its face had gone from facing up to facing down."
I said, it turned itself over?
He said, "I don't know. In those days, nothing could be explained clearly. But from then on, I never let it face upward again. Once it entered the museum, I kept its face to the wall. It stayed like that for nearly 40 years.
The train pulled farther away, and my uncle was still standing on the platform. Through the window, I watched him. He waved at me, then turned and walked off.
Later, I got a letter from my father at home. The letter said that the dealer surnamed Zhou was arrested at the Nanyang train station on August 23rd. In the warehouse he'd rented, the police found 23 Nanyang pictorial stones, all unearthed from Han tombs. He confessed that in his life he'd collected more than 50 pictorial stones, but he said he never dared touch that 4-eyed Fangxiangshi again. He said that stone wasn't a stone. There was something in its eyes. When he looked at it, it was looking at him too. Later still, in the spring of 1998, when I got into university, I passed through Nanyang and visited the Han Painting Museum again. The Fangxiangshi was still standing at the far end of the exhibition hall, face to the wall.
I stood behind it, a few steps away, and watched it for a while. Maybe it was my imagination, but I kept feeling that its 4 eyes were looking at me, right through the stone. As I turned to leave, my uncle was standing there behind me. I don't know when he'd come. He said, "Don't turn around. It keeps its eyes open because it's looking at us, the ones who dug up its home. The more you turn back, the more it remembers you."
I said, then when will it close its eyes?
He said, "When there's no one left digging up graves." I never went back to Nanyang again. Later I heard that my uncle had retired, and the Han Painting Museum had moved to a new place. The Fangxiangshi went along with the museum stones, moved in the same lot, still faced to the wall. A couple of years ago, I saw the new exhibition hall of the museum in a documentary. The camera swept past row after row of pictorial stones, and finally paused on one square stone with 4 eyes. In the shot, it was still faced to the wall.
But in that last shot of the documentary, I always feel like it had turned, just a little. The story is finished. What do you think? If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. New urban legend every day. If you enjoyed this story, Please like and subscribe. New urban legend every day.